Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Aisha Nazir. Welcome to the series of inheritance. Today we are going to discuss the second part of inheritance, that is protected inheritance. So what is protected inheritance? Let's understand it with an example. We will continue with the same example that we have discussed in the public inheritance. So I will recommend you to first watch that video so that you will be able to understand the concept and the program easily. So we are following the same code, same example. So in protected inheritance, as we have discussed, this is the base class, and in the base class we have three sections as the private section, in which we have a function that name is private function, and it simply prints I am a private. Then the second part is the protected section, in which protected section we has a program which name is protected function, which prints only a statement I am a protected. After that, the public section, we have a public function that prints a simple statement I am public. And then we have a single inheritance in which a child class derived from the base class, and it's declaring that the base class is protected. It means that this base class is basically protected. So in the protected, if the base class is protected, can we access the public section? Can we access the protected members of the class? Can we access the private members of the class? So let's see the visibility rules. So after that, in the main section, we simply created an object of derived class, that is the child class, and we are going to access b.public function. If you remember that in public inheritance, when we call with the object child class object, we call the public function, it gives us the result, right? It simply prints the statement I am public on the console. But when the inheritance is protected, then can we access the public functions? No. We cannot access directly the public functions or the protected functions outside the class. We cannot access them. In protected inheritance, the public section and the protected members becomes the protected, because we declared the base class as protected. So the whole class will declare as protected. So it means that if we have to access the public section, or if we have to access the protected section members, then we first have to call them in the main child class. If we want to use the protected and public and private members, data members or member functions, then we have to call them in the child class, and then we can call them outside the class. So if I call directly outside the class with the object name b.public function, it will generate an error. And what would be the error? The error is public function is inaccessible. Why? Because we declared the class as protected. So the base class is protected now. We cannot access them directly outside the class. So how we can access them? Now what would be the mechanism? So to access the private section, to access the public data members and member functions, we have to first call the public function inside the child class. So here in the child class, in the public section, we created a new function which name is show, and in the function show, we call the public function. So in this way, if we call b.show, it means that will call the b class, that is the child class object, means it will call b.show, that is that child class function. Then it will call the protected base class public function, that is public function, and it will print I am public. In the same way, we have to access the protected functions. We cannot directly call the protected functions outside the class. So first we have to call the protected functions in the child class, and then we can call these functions outside the class. So this is the protected function. When we are going to try to call the child class with B object, we are going to call b.protect function. It will generate an error because we are going to access the protected function. So what would be the error? The error is protected function is protected. It means that we have to first call it in child class and then we can call it outside the class with the same class object. So here, when we call the protected function and public function inside the show function, that is the part of the child class public section, then it creates no any problem and it simply shows the results on the console. I am protected and I am public. Now in the protected inheritance, if the inheritance is protected, now what's about the private sections? Because private part is not allowed to be used anywhere outside the class, even in the child classes. So how we can access the private functions and private members, private variables? We can use in the same way as we use in the public inheritance. There is a rule for the private functions that private data members and member functions are only allowed to use inside the same class functions. Means the same class function can use the private functions and private data members. So we will use this technique and access the private function. So here is the private section, and inside the private section we created a function which name is private function. So when we will call this private function inside the public section's public function. So this is the public section's public function, and here inside the public function we call the private function. Now it will create no any error. So after that, because it's the protected inheritance, we will call the public function inside the child class, so that there is no any problem with the private data members, and there should be no any problem with the protected members, because in the protected inheritance the public and protected also becomes protected for the other classes. So here we call the void show function with the B object. So when we call b.show, it prints all three functions: I am private, I am public, and I am protected. We call the protected function and public function in the child class show method, and the private function we call inside the public function of the base class. So hopefully you understand the concept. Let's summarize. In the protected inheritance, when a child class derived from a protected base class, the public and protected members of the base class becomes protected members of the derived class. As this is the base class, it's the child class, and the public member of the base class would become the protected, and the protected members, as we know, that already protected. So it converts the public members to as protected, while the private members are not accessible. So if we want to access the private members, so we have to use a special mechanism that we have discussed. So in protected inheritance, we can't access public members that are inaccessible outside the class. So this is all about the protected inheritance. Hopefully you understand the concept. In the next lecture we will understand the private inheritance with the same example. Thank you very much.